Hello and welcome to Just Read. So this is my first YouTube video, and I decided to start doing Just Read as a way to interview the books I've read and share them with the people on the internet. I think a big barrier to reading sometimes is feeling like you have to pick the right book, or you have to read a classic, or you have to go highly academic with it. And the truth is, you don't. You just have to read. Just read. So the first book I'm going to be interviewing today is Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. This book was actually voted number 12 on the New York Times 100 Best Books of the 21st Century list. I found that out after I had already read the book. And the way I came across this book was not through being introduced to Joan Didion in a high school class or on the internet. I just saw it at the half-price bookstore, picked it up, and read it. I didn't even know who Joan Didion was or anything about it, but I love this book, and that's why I'm choosing it to be the first book I'm reviewing for Just Read. So for Just Read, I think it's really important to take a quick look at every aspect of the book and then talk about my thoughts about it. So the 5 ways I'm going to break down these books is through structure, theme, writing style, symbolism, and the personal impact it had on me. First up is structure. Even though you may not be a writer, structure is still really good to understand and acknowledge in the books you're reading because structure influences storytelling. This book is a great example of how it subconsciously does that. This book has 22 chapters. Some were as short as 4 pages, while others went to about 17. But it all felt really well paced, and I never got the feeling that a chapter was dragging. A unique element that Joan Didion employs in her book is by subdividing her chapters by chunks of paragraphs. So what may look like the end of a chapter is really just a continuance to another thought she has while going through her journey. These paragraphs start with an enlarged font letter, which is something you usually see at the beginning of a chapter. But it's really well employed in this book because this book is snippets into her thoughts and scenes that she's going through as she's going through her year of magical thinking, which, as I will get into later, is not so magical. So it really helps you move forward and transition through the story. Theme. When I first picked up this book, knowing nothing about Joan Didion, knowing nothing about this book, I thought it was about her thinking positively for a whole year. Like, that's what I thought it was. Turns out, it's not. So the book opens with her daughter Quintana Roo in the hospital, comatose. Her husband is alive, and they're devastated. They just come back from the hospital, they come home, and her husband dies. He falls over from a heart attack. And enter the year of grieving that she goes through of her husband and later of her daughter. Magical? I don't think so. But thinking, she is thinking a lot. And she is thinking about guilt. She's thinking about grief. She's thinking about the things that could have happened, the things that didn't happen, the things that she should have done. And I think she approaches it from such a way that it really opens up your mind and makes you feel what she's feeling without feeling depressed. This book was really well done in that it is about a hard topic, but personally I didn't find it depressing because just her writing style, it was curious almost. And of course, I had feelings while I read it, but it was more feelings of like, wow, she went through that. Wow, she's writing about that. Wow, I'm reading about it. It's so interesting to get a glimpse into the mind of what they're called the bereaved, people who lose people who have horrible things happen to them. A lot of times when you interact with them in person, unless you have a deep personal relationship, all you can offer is platitudes, and all you get back from them is platitudes. Thank you so much for your care. Oh, I appreciate that, all that. But this book is a really intimate look into Joan Didion. This book was written in 2005, I believe, around there. And she went on to live for so many more years. She just died recently. So to read this book and get a glimpse into that time of her life, and then to look at the time she lived after and how she was feeling, it just is so interesting. Writing style. So Joan Didion actually started out doing journalism, and I feel like her journalism experience really was wonderful in this book because it treads the line between journal and journalistic and fiction. I almost felt like I was reading a fiction book, but I knew I wasn't. Her scene descriptions I really enjoy. There was a scene, I think she was going on a helicopter for some kind of medical something, and it just sticks in my head. I found her writing style to be very introspective without being dense, which is something that sometimes happens to me when I'm reading introspective books. It's like big long chunks of prose that never has a break, and it's just all about the feelings and the thoughts. And although this book is very much rooted in feelings and thoughts, she also leaves space for her words to breathe. And I love the way that she describes the places she goes, which is something that I think is missing in introspective books. They so focus on the inside that they say nothing about the outside. But this book is a great balance of both. Symbolism. Honestly, I think this book was light on symbolism. I read it a couple months ago, so whatever I found symbolic, I kind of find hard to remember right now. But if you read it and you have, especially if you have connections to grief, if you have connections to mourning and experiences that you find in your mind as you read, it will carry a lot of symbolism. And finally, personal impact. I think the first impact this book has given me is making me a fan of Joan Didion, in that I want to go read all of her other books, which I'm going to do soon. And hopefully I'll bring them to Just Read. But this book has really given me an eye into a process that I found kind of mysterious before. Joan Didion experienced grief and losing somebody in the two ways that most people do, either by sudden death or by a long sickness. What she doesn't go into too much in the book is the fact that her daughter died as well. And there's been some speculation amongst the literary chatters that the daughter, had drug addiction and kind of abused her body in some ways, and that's why she came down with the illness she did. I hope you will read it. You don't have to love it. You can hate it, but at least you read it. Just read. All right. See you later.